God dwells in you. Let us pray. Holy and loving God, you create us in wonderful and beautiful ways, and you rejoice in our life, and you rejoice in all that is about us and in how we live and love in this world. Continue to not just rain down your blessings on us, but help us be more aware of the blessings that emerge from each and every one of us. Help us to see blessing in each other's eyes and to feel blessing in each other's safe touch. Help us to be blessing for one another and for this world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Oh, it is a wonderful thing to have everyone here with us here in the forum for this new year of Rector's Forums and everyone watching with us online. Because we're running late, I am going to sort of skip with the initial pleasantries and go right to announcing our guest, who I am so excited that we have with us. And we are blessed. We've tried to get Allison here a couple different times, and it's finally worked out. Allison Smith-VanKuiken is one of Equality California's 2 program directors and oversees the organization's outreach, engagement, and leadership development programs, as well as programs to reduce HIV stigma and to increase civic engagement opportunities for transgender and non-binary people. Allison came to Equality California with 15 years of experience as a leader, organizer, and with numerous political educational campaigns around the country. She's managed political campaigns for a diverse array of candidates in battleground states, has been recognized as the only transgender person to lead an ultimately successful effort to fight a ballot box challenge to an LGBTQ civil rights ordinance. As member of the Human Rights Campaign field and executive teams, she worked to pass numerous local LGBTQ civil rights ordinances and contributed to the passage of groundbreaking statewide LGBTQ legislation in Maryland, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. She's also held leadership, board, and volunteer positions with the Democratic Party, the Red Cross, the Humane Society, that was probably good for today, Planned Parenthood, the Trans 100 List, Transgender Michigan, the Trans Can Work Employment Program, the Los Angeles Resist March, and a whole bunch of other things. She holds bachelor's degrees in public relations and political science for Grand Valley State University, and possibly most importantly, she lives in Pasadena with her wife and baby daughter. And Allison, it is wonderful to have you here. Please join me in welcoming Allison VanKuiken.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for the warm welcome. Sometimes when I hear that, I forget about a lot of the stuff I've done along the way. But I'm excited to talk a bit about that. I don't often get the opportunity to share my story. I've always centered other stories of people I get to work with to expose them and give the opportunity and privilege that I now have to share my story with all of you. I'd love to start off just by saying thank you, Mike, and to Susan Russell for inviting me here today. I do apologize. I've not been able to get here sooner.
It's been both of us.
It's been a little crazy since November, and it's been a lot. But I'm excited to be here this morning. So I always like to start these things off just by kind of introducing myself in a very simple kind of way. I'm Allison. I'm a proud transgender woman. I do use she and her pronouns in trans world and LGBTQ safe spaces. We do like to talk about our personal pronouns, so I do like she and hers. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a daughter. In fact, I'd love to take a quick second to point out my little beautiful family back there. Megan and Eleanor are here with me. So hopefully Eleanor doesn't get too distracting.
Just be yourself.
But that is what I'm most proud of and what I work towards is so that everyone has that opportunity to have a family and to raise a little one. And we'll get to that. I'm also the program director for Equality California. Thank you for the quick introduction. I'm always advocating. It's what I love doing. I love helping people. I love making the world a little bit better for everybody. And that's what I get to do there. And I get to work on all of these different issues. And I'll talk a bit more about why I came to California to do that. It's a great opportunity. So today, I'm going to try to quickly get through 3 items. I'm going to share my story. I'm going to talk a bit about the LGBT movement, where we're at, the things that we're doing. And then I'm going to talk a bit about how to be an ally. I'm sure some of you have heard about how to be a great ally. Well, this will be a little bit of review. And for those that haven't, maybe take some notes, because we need our allies, definitely at this point in time. So my story, I was born in 1980 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We're known for furniture, Amway, and Betsy DeVos, and I apologize about the last two. I had a pretty normal childhood. I grew up in the suburbs. I had two parents. They got divorced relatively early, which unfortunately that's normal in this day and age, but it positioned me with my friends who, by the time I graduated high school, about half my friends were divorced. And so I was kind of the pillar, if you will, for listening to stories. And I don't know, it just kind of put me in a place where I listened more and shared my experiences to help them along. As I was growing up, I knew I was trans at a relatively young age. I think I was probably about 4 or 5, and I just knew that something was different about me. At that age, the parents were kind of cool with letting me play dress up and do those things, but then as that didn't kind of define itself as a phase, then my parents intervened a bit. And so that was the beginning of me suppressing my trans identity for decades. I mean, quite a while. When I finally graduated high school and I was a free bird to go do what I wanted, I moved to Minnesota for a couple of years. I chose Minnesota because it was one of the best places in the country to identify as trans. It was away from my house, so I got to have a little freedom. It was a really interesting time in my life. I was about 19, 20 years old. I started to experiment with my identity. It was the first time I had LGBT friends. It was the first time I ever knew anyone that was trans. And it was an amazing experience. Right up till one night when one of my best friends went home with the wrong person from the bar and was beaten within an inch of her life. And it was a terrifying experience for me. So terrifying that it sent me back in the closet for the next decade. It was just a really big wake-up call. The world was very different in the late 90s regarding trans people. I just did not feel safe. I felt safe behind this assigned identity I had at birth as a male, and so I took advantage of that. For the next 10 years, several things happened. I stayed busy, and by staying busy, that allowed me to suppress that identity a bit. I had this weird moment where I was traveling around the country as a rock band manager, and I met all kinds of people, went all over the place. It was my first opportunity to come to California. It was also kind of the beginning point of politics for me. I was around a lot of college campuses, a lot of politically active people. Y'all remember we had this President Bush back then, and a lot of people were mad about that, and we talked about that, and it caught my interest. It was really the beginnings of understanding politics and how to get involved. It was the beginning of me showing up and doing campaign work. About my mid-20s, I had this opportunity to work for my family. One of the members of my family is very privileged, owns a pretty large coffee company in the United States, and I got to go work for him. And that took me around the country more because I love traveling. And but it also introduced me to the other end of the political spectrum. By that point, I was talking about politics. Now I was arguing politics all the time with family members and some of the more privileged individuals in the work I did. After a couple years, I had found great success doing the coffee thing. I was selling these big programs to places like Costco and Walmart, and it looked like my life was going to be pretty privileged at that point, and I could do whatever I wanted. But I was really, really unhappy inside. Again, I was suppressing my identity significantly by this point. It wasn't going away. It was getting more intense and more uncomfortable, and I was becoming sadder. And despite the things I had in my life, that was not enough. I wasn't being authentic to myself, and it hurt. It hurt a great deal. And so I decided to take this huge leap. I didn't know what I would have. I never completed my college education at that point in time. I just didn't know what I really wanted to do, other than I liked going to do these political campaigns on my side time. They were not paid. It was just something to do. So I asked around, and I had this opportunity to do a campaign and really learn and have my first real mentor. And I decided from that I wanted to go back to school. So I left this great job and this income and this lifestyle to go back to school in my mid-20s and to get a degree so that I could do political work. And it just so happened that around that time I closed a really big deal that allowed me to specifically just focus on volunteering on campaigns and getting some real experience and basically interning for the time I was in college. Over those years, I got pretty good at what I was doing, and by the time I graduated college, I was running my own campaigns. And was very good at. I never lost, actually, and so I became very popular with people to have working on their campaigns. And I eventually got to a place where I worked my way into the Michigan legislature. I was the chief of staff for a high flyer, and I felt like that was the moment. I just turned 30. In fact, this is a story I don't share often, but I was 30. My partner at the time threw this big party for me for my birthday, and I remember walking into that room and seeing all these people there that I loved, but not a single one knew the real me. And I could not, I knew at that point I had to do something. So I ended up coming out shortly after that as trans. And I thought that in all of this time, I'd been building this safe space and this network to come out and to be me. And what ended up happening is I lost my job, I lost my partner, I lost some of my family members. I lost it all. And I had at that point I lost some of my friends. They were nice, but in the end, they weren't really there for me. So I decided to change everything, and I moved across the state to Detroit. Things were a little bit more progressive there. Again, Grand Rapids, Michigan, DeVos wasn't the best place to come out as trans. But then I moved to Detroit, and I had some friends there. I started building friends there. I had some friends through the political work to start off with, and that was the beginning. So that takes me into my real journey. The LGBT work I've been doing for almost last decade, but for a while. When I came out in Detroit, I had this wonderful opportunity to run this political campaign, taking LGBT rights to the ballot. And I threw myself into that work. I wasn't sure if I would ever have an opportunity like that again. I really wanted to prove myself with the experience I had learned. And so I threw myself into that work. And at the end of the day, a lot of the national groups, a lot of people just didn't want us doing these little local campaigns. But we raised the money to win, and we fought hard, and we won. And then when we won, all those national groups that didn't want to help us, well, all of a sudden they were all trying to hire me. And I thought that was kind of interesting, but I took that opportunity, and that took me around this country of ours. I started going to a lot of battleground states and working on campaigns there. It was, for a lot of political people in the Midwest, it was an opportunity for them to learn a lot about trans people, because I had always found myself to be the only trans person operating at that kind of level where you're running campaigns, winning campaigns, raising lots of money. There just were not any possibility models for me to look at, so I had to figure that out on my own. I love that work. It took me everywhere. It took me to Ohio, which we were talking about a little while ago. It took me throughout the Midwest, Indiana, Ohio, Wisconsin. Ultimately, my wife and I decided that we wanted to live on the East Coast, so we started doing some work in Maryland and Pennsylvania and Washington, D.C. We loved it a great deal out there, but we decided that that wasn't really where we wanted to settle. Shortly after that, we found out that we were expecting our daughter. I actually had this big decision I had to make at one point in time. Did I want to move forward with my transition, or do I at least want to try to start a family? I've always wanted a family, so I threw my heart and soul into that, and it took a while, but we found out that we were expecting Eleanor. So that really sent us on this journey of, oh wow, instead of running around to all these campaigns, let's settle down somewhere. And that's what brought us to California. I wanted to, in some respects, live in a state that was the safest possible state for Eleanor to grow up in, and in a safe community, hence Pasadena. I wanted to have a job that allowed me to build something. Doing campaign work, it's like you build this thing, it's there for a couple months, and then it goes away. Or you win, and if it's an issue, great, you've gotten some new policy in place that will help people. Or if it's a candidate, well, then that's a whole nother level of building coalitions to get votes and legislation done. But in California, I had an opportunity to run programs and to focus on bigger issues, long-term issues, like integrating trans people into society and creating opportunity, reducing stigma for people living with HIV, to also do the political stuff, because as an organization, we do lots and lots of political things. But California offered that opportunity, and here we are. And we've been here for about 16 months, and I absolutely love it. And at this point, I'm just trying to figure out, how do we just keep moving forward as a family? As a transgender person, I like to think that I think of a lot of the same things that other families do. How do I raise a good child? How do I provide opportunities for her? How do I keep her safe? Not too different than what some of you may already know and feel. So that is my story. I can open it up to questions in a little bit, but I want to get to these other two parts. Which the first one is, I want to talk a bit about the LGBT movement. I'm not sure how familiar all of you are with our movement, but we're a very big, dynamic, and diverse movement. if you think about it for a second, we are everybody. We are LGBTQ, which are five different things entirely. We are made up by every ethnicity there possibly is. We come from all over the world. Our places of origin are all different, which all have cultural systems that are all different. We are all ages. One of the more interesting dynamics is the youth versus middle-aged people like me versus our golden seniors. They're all very different and in different places. We come from different economic privileges. Working with the Human Rights Campaign for a number of years, I got to work with some of the higher-end folks, more privileged folks in our class, and then working within the transgender community, I worked with the most vulnerable in our community. Kind of touched on it, but we come from different faiths and backgrounds, so all of those divisions are within our community, and also we have different political beliefs in our community. Yes, we do have Republicans. Interesting sort they are. But we have great people in our community, and we have jerks too. I mean, we have everything on all the spectrums, and what that basically does is it creates a very unique dynamic for me in my work every day. So that also means we have a lot of different issues. So I kind of broke this down on a national, state, and local level. On a national level, there's all kinds of stuff we're working on. As some of you may know, recently they rolled back the access of transgender people to the military. They're trying to reduce or really throw transgender people out of the military. That's a really big issue. Our organization has taken action on that. We're attempting to sue the president. My wife's organization, Lambda Legal, is working on that as well. I think everyone's trying to jump in that because that's really important. I mean, honestly, the opportunity for our people to serve is important. It's for some, it's the only opportunity they will have to get out of where they're at and to make something of themselves. We experience discrimination on every single level, and so on a national level, we've been trying to fight just to get basic civil rights and to be the law of the land for decades now, and that has not happened. And we are probably the furthest away we've been in a long time now with after November. We have access to health care that we're defending. A good part of my life lately, and half the reason I haven't been able to show up here is because we're fighting for the ACA every day. The ACA protects all of our people in some ways, and people living with HIV, I mean, that is everything. We have made so much progress in that space because of the ACA and access to treatment and prevention strategies. And then immigration. A lot of people don't think about this, but we have a lot of LGBT people around the country that come to the United States because we are better than their countries, and they come here for safety, and now we're just trying to give them the opportunity to live and have that opportunity here. These are all things we did not worry about prior to November, but they are big priorities for us now. In the states, it kills me every year, but every year there's about 100 pieces of anti-LGBT legislation that are introduced in some states. Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, some of the southern states. And these pieces of legislation create stigma, they reduce opportunity, they harm children. That's what really kills me is in places like Texas, they went after trans kids. Who does that? I mean, that's horrible, but that's what our fight looks like these days. In some states like California, we're fighting to make progress. One of the things I'm most proud of is that we are trying to really reduce HIV stigma in this state. And if I'm doing good on time, I'll try to do the call to action with some of the things that we're doing there. But we're really advancing policy and creating opportunity for trans people to live in California, reducing stigma for people living with HIV. We're fighting for greater access to health care for folks in California. It's amazing work. I mean, this is why I came here, because I wanted to try to make lives better. I wanted to see this intersectional approach to the work and to policy and action that impacts all those people I talked about a little while ago. A note on our orgs, there is no singular LGBT organization that does one thing that's the end-all, be-all of it all. We have advocacy organizations at the national level, the state level, the local level that work to advance policy. We have legal groups like Lambda Legal that fight policy and will take organizations to court to ensure equal access to opportunity. We have business organizations that work to make businesses more friendly. We have faith organizations, all broken down into the denominations that are amazing groups to work with, and I've had the pleasure of working with in some of the states that we need our faith partners in faith to be involved. We have groups that work on specific populations, the Latino population, or Latinx population, African Americans, Asian Pacific. All those different populations have their own advocacy groups. We have community centers. Community centers are more of a regional group, but they're fighting for everything. The advocacy I mentioned, to just giving people space to be who they are. They help work with GSAs. They sometimes provide healthcare. Very important groups. And then to talk a bit about some of the challenges ahead. I think you kind of got it as I was saying, but internally, one of the more interesting things I've found, and I find it more in California than anywhere else, but that's because we're the most diverse of all the states, is as a movement, we're learning to work together. A couple years ago, we had a huge victory with the passage of marriage equality, the defense of marriage equality on the court level. While that impacted a great deal of people in our community, it did not make a difference for quite a few also. And so since that has happened, I've noticed there's been this conversation or a movement about how do we be more intersectional? How do we address the issues of all those other people I talked about? And so we're learning to work together. Another reason I came out to California is that our state is definitely leading that conversation. We're really putting it into action. Particularly at my organization, I like to think that we're really at the tip of the spear with a lot of it, integrating it into our staff, integrating it into our policies and priorities, and then sharing that with other groups that we get to work with around the country. Externally, our challenges are pretty overt. I mean, we are facing this overt rise of hate. It is everywhere. Hate crimes are happening at an escalated rate. I get these reports from time to time, and I hear these calls, and it just breaks my heart that people all of a sudden feel emboldened to just say things and to do violent things, and it's okay. It's not okay. We're seeing more and more anti-LGBT policy. One year, a few years ago, it was like maybe 50, 60 bills. Next year it was 100. Last year, I want to say it was like 150. Is next year going to be 200 bills against our community? I don't know, but it concerns me. We have disparities in our community. A lot of people don't think about this either, but the access to healthcare in our community couldn't be wider for some. I work in the Inland Empire quite a bit. It's one of the places I prioritize because I got a report in front of me that basically said transgender people, about 90% of them have access to healthcare, but only 1/3 of them are out to their healthcare providers. Healthcare for trans people is fundamental. It is very important. I mean, from mental health to physical well-being, this is important. And if 2/3 of the transgender population in the Inland Empire, which is tens of thousands of people, can't even tell their doctors who they really are, that is not good. That is not good for their well-being. That is just not good at all. These disparities exist, and someone's got to get in there and do something about it. They have to educate. They have to create safe spaces for people to come out and have those conversations and to access care. We have problems with funding sometimes. I think this is okay to say, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. But the LGBT community versus the people that don't like the LGBT community is vastly underfunded. If you took all of our LGBT funding and put it into one monetary sum, it is a fraction of how much money goes into hate in this country. People don't really know that, but that's the reality. So we are under-resourced, and particularly now, because people are emboldened. And that presents challenges in and of itself. And then there's all kinds of challenges just with opportunity and understanding and creating the safe space for understanding. I think we've come a long way with the L and the G members of our community, but with the trans people and non-binary and expansive people, younger people tend to identify not so much with a particular binary. There's a lot of learning that needs to be done. I feel like every month it's something new that we need to talk about with a large population, and with limited resources, it gets hard. It gets really, really hard. So with that, this is why we need our allies, which brings me to the third item I wanted to talk about. We absolutely need our allies in this fight. There's not enough of us within their own community that show up to do this work, and so we need our allies to help. So on the allied topic, I've always tried to distill the allied approach down to one very simple principle. How do I be an ally? Do you all remember the golden rule? Treat others as you like to be treated. I always like to start there because it's very simple. Just treat others as you would like to be treated, and you'll most likely do okay. But there is a caveat, and that's to understand your privilege. We talk a lot about privilege in this movement now. I'm sure some of you have heard that term quite a bit lately. Some of you may not have heard that at all recently. But to sum up privilege, because it's such a comprehensive and unique topic to each of you, I always like to look at privilege as Is it a problem for me? Is it a problem for me? Money. Is it a problem for me? No. Well, that probably means you have the privilege of having some money. Do you have a problem going to the bathroom? Do you have to worry about someone coming in there and insulting you? That's a bathroom privilege. I don't necessarily have a bathroom privilege sometimes, and it concerns me about how I'm going to raise my daughter. Do you have the privilege of driving down the street and worried that you're going to get pulled over, maybe shot by a police officer? That is a privilege. So in almost any way, shape, or form you could think about, is it a problem for me? Yes, no. That'll tell you if you have a certain privilege. And that privilege will inform you about how you should treat other people. To kind of frame that, I don't really have a problem when people misgender me from time to time. It happens. I totally understand it. I haven't gone to the extent to try to raise my voice or to fit in a little bit more with the binary, but it doesn't really bother me. But for others in my community, it does. And so that's a privilege I can afford, or I'm afforded, that I try to be conscious with everyone else. So it's important to me to get pronouns right with people, because that does make a difference. Now, taking those two things, the golden rule, understanding your privilege, think about this. Apply those two rules to your relationships in your life. And that's one of the first and most important ways you can be a really good ally. In your relationships, starting with your family. If you have people in your family that come out as LGBT, love them. It's very simple. Love them, support them. I like to think that the reason I'm here speaking to you and the reason I've done all the stuff I've done is that I was loved by my family after I came out. Some people let me go, but my family loved me, supported me, and that was enough to give me confidence to take those big steps and to really kind of learn who I was as a person and to engage. So if you have family, love them, listen to them, treat them as you would like to be treated. Try to understand that some of the things that you take for granted might not be taken for granted or lived a privilege for other folks. For your friends, if you have friends that come out to you as LGBT, same thing. They are your friends. Treat them as they were before they came out. Listen to them, support them. That is important. Colleagues at work. I'm sure some of you may have encountered LGBT people at work who come out. Again, treat them with respect. That is everything. And then in those relationships, do the best you can to be inclusive and to share those values. I always like to tell people, it's what you say when I'm not around that really matters. If you've got some friends that are, that trans thing's so weird, that I don't want to be around bathrooms with them, that's an opportunity to speak up. That is an opportunity to go, you know what, that's not right. I know some trans people, they're fine, they're great, they have families. Like what you're doing could potentially be a problem. Share those values with them. On disparities, this is the next one. I think this is really important, especially for those that can make a difference. I want you to think about where you can make a real impact. If you're in a privileged place that can definitely lift up LGBT people. And by that, I'd like you to think are you in schools? Are you in a school right now that's having a discussion about LGBT people or trans people in schools, in bathrooms? That is a place where you can speak up. And it will make a difference. It will make a big difference. Even in California, we're struggling with this. I spent some time working on this Rockland situation up in Northern California, where a teacher decided to read a book about a transgender kid because a child in her class identified as trans, and she was trying to create a safe space for that child to grow and learn. And some people spoke up about that, and they were not happy that happened. And one of the neatest things I have seen is that hundreds and hundreds of parents, they had nothing to do, no trans children of their own, no LGBT people, they showed up and they spoke on behalf of the school's values of being inclusive. That's a great way to be an ally. Say you were an employer. Giving that opportunity for an LGBT person to work with you is everything. If you can create that space, make that space. If you can drive inclusive policy at your work or make a policy at your work, do it. In employment or healthcare, if you are a nurse or a doctor or you run an office, what can you do to make that office more tolerant or accepting and welcoming for LGBT people? That's a big one, especially trans people. It really, really, really is. But ask yourself where you can make an impact and how you can make the spaces that you work within or spend a lot of time in safe spaces for all. That's a huge way to be an ally. And then on the third item, and I definitely have to go here given the nature of my work, one way you can definitely be an ally, and this is almost like a 102 level ally, is supporting our movement and supporting our work. We need more LGBT candidates in office. I think one of the criteria that I would love to see everyone consider is that when you're going to the ballot box, is this candidate I'm supporting pro-LGBT? You know, are they going to get up there and attack LGBT people and attack people in society and fuel stigma and really create more divisions in this country? Or are they going to really live those values of inclusiveness? That's definitely some fundamental criteria to consider and to bring into your decision-making frame. Another one is supporting legislation. It takes a minute to call the governor or your local legislator or your city council member if something's happening in your life. I can tell you right now in California, we're advancing 6 different pieces of groundbreaking legislation. They're all sitting on the governor's desk right now, and that a call from anyone makes a difference. So if you're looking for something to do, that's a great thing to do. Engage on that front. I gotta say, showing up as an organizer, it means the world when people show up to stuff. One of the things that really opened my eyes is back when I was doing that one campaign in Royal Oak, Michigan, the discrimination campaign. A lot of LGBT people were afraid to show up. They did not want to out themselves on doors. They didn't want to out themselves on the phone. There was stigma about their identities, and they were not comfortable coming to support that campaign. So our allies showed up, and it was our allies that drove that fight. And so if there's an opportunity to show up, be it marching down the street, you know, we did that resist march a couple months ago. I'm sure we'll have plenty more. That makes a difference. And I did mention speaking up, but I'll say it again. It's what you say when we're not around that really makes a difference. People that don't know LGBT people, that might make disparaging remarks, will learn more from an ally calling them out on it than they will ever from someone like me. And so that makes a difference. And then lastly, supporting the movement is important. Like I said, our resources are different than the people trying to go against us. If you have time, volunteer for an organization, whether it's ours, whether it's a community center, whether it's one of the many groups that works on the various issues in our community. If you've got an afternoon, you want to show up, you've got some old clothes you want to donate, or whatever the case may be, we need that. So if you have time, show up. And support and try to create those spaces. So we have 2 minutes for questions?
Yeah, just maybe one question, but then are you able to stay after?
I can stay, yeah, I was planning on it. And I have a quick call to action, which I will just say right now before we get going. In the back, we have voter registration forms. I love empowering voters right now. It's my favorite thing. If you need to update your registration, if you've moved, if you've changed your name, anything changed since last election, you want to update your registrations, we can do that in the back. We also have a big email list. If you're interested in learning more about the movement, the things that you can do every single week, we put out about 2 or 3 emails because it's crazy right now for ways people can get involved and help. If you have a moment, want to join the email list, you can do so right in the back there, right at that table, and we greatly appreciate that. With that.
And actually, first of all, can we just thank Allison? Thank you so much for being here.